Hi, welcome or welcome back. This is the New in Review. Here we talk about book and all bookish content. Today I come to you with my 1 year reading of Bearing the Cross. And I chose this platform to do this project uh, because for one, it's a book, and I think books are great. But most importantly, in light of everything that we're dealing with here in the United States, in terms of the media, corporations, um, just everything that's going on, is that this is just a reminder to let you know we, the people, have the power to make change. And so, this past holiday season, there was supposed to be a massive boycott. And although a lot of people um, did participate, myself included, um, I think for content's sake, a lot of people may have not participate because they feel like the events that's going on have nothing to do with them. They are unable to make change because they're only one person. But there were a lot of people who sat out and didn't buy anything, or they either bought from black business owners or small local business owners, which was also great. But me personally, I sat out all the way. So um, to each their own, and wherever you can participate in terms of saving democracy and saving the future of this country, I encourage you to do it. So for you, it may not be boycotting the Target, because if you live in a small town and that is the only place where you can get groceries, then the likelihood of you completely boycotting them may not happen. um, but yeah, so there are different situations. So I took the jacket off the book, but I will be reading a year-long read of Bearing the Cross. And so I would do it in two ways. I would do half sometimes in a live setting, and sometimes I'll just read the page a day that I promised that I would read online, so people can get an idea of the subject heading, and also for you to read along, and so we can have great conversation. So I'm going to start from front to back. Excuse me if I butcher up some of the words. Reading out loud is not my thing, so this is going to be a challenge, but just stick with me. So Bearing the Cross is about Martin Luther King, his rise in the fight for equality. So it talks about the young Martin Luther King. I think he was like between 24, 25, 26 in that age era. When um, what's her name? Rosa Parks decided that on December the 1st that she was not going to give up her seat. And that was just one of many um, events that were told, but there was someone else prior to that. I think it was March the 2nd. I think her name was Claudette. I forgot the last name. Forgive me. But this has been boiling, for a long time. So it definitely kicked off another leg in the civil rights movement, because there were other issues that Black people were dealing with prior to Rosa Parks um, being jailed for violating the ordinance. So let me read from this book, and hopefully you're able to acquire the book and read along with me. I think they do have this book on audio also, if you're interested. But it's Bearing the Cross, Martin Luther King Jr. and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference by David J Garrow. David J Garrow, he is notorious for writing about civil rights leaders um, and Black leadership. The original book was published in 1986. So next year it will mark um, 40 years. And so, yeah, if I keep up with this one a day, I think we'll have some good content going. So of course we have the the table of contents. So this entire book is about to read is about 600 something pages. I kind of figured if I read 2 pages a day, front and back, that's 2 pages. Um, I can finish the book in a year. And whether I'm live or if it's pre-recorded, the goal is not to take up too much time, but to leave some food for thought and get everybody's insight. So I'm going to start from the very first chapter, the Montgomery boycott, 1955 through 1956. Thursday had been busy and tiring for Mrs. Raymond A. Parks. Her job as a tailor's assistant at the Montgomery Fair department store had left her neck and shoulder particularly sore. When she left work at 5:30 p.m. that December 1st, 1955, she went across the street to a drugstore in searching of a heating pad. Mrs. Park didn't find one, but she purchased a few other articles before recrossing to the street to her usual bus stop on Court Square. The buses were especially crowded this cold, dark evening, and when she boarded on for her Cleveland Avenue route, only one row of seats. The rows immediately behind the first 10 seats that always were reserved for whites only had any vacancies. She took an aisle seat with a black man on her right next to the window and two black women in the parallel seats across the way. Now, I'm gonna stop there. So that's she's let so anytime black people boarded the bus, and I'm surprised they didn't articulate this in here, but there are other accounts of this when they board the bus. In some cases, they will have to pay their fare, get off the bus, and re-enter on the bus on the back. And there was a section reserved for whites only. So, but it will tell you more detail here. This is interesting. As more passengers boarded at each of the two stops, the blacks moved to the rear where they stood, and the whites occupied the exclusive seats at the front of the bus. At the third stop, more passengers got on, and one, a white male, was left standing after the final seat was taken. The bus driver, J.F. Blake, looked back and called out Mrs. Park and her three colleagues. All right, all right, you folks, I want those two seats. Montgomery's customary practice of racial preference demanded that all four blacks would have to stand in order to allow this one white man to sit. Since no one was allowed to sit parallel with a white, no one moved at first. Blake spoke again. You all better get right light on yourselves and let me get them seats and let me get those seats. At that, the two women across from Mrs. Parks rose and moved to the rear. The man beside her rose also, and she moved her legs to allow him out into the aisles. She remained silent but shifted to the window side of the seat. So we have to remember that those in those days, in those days the and still now today, but when getting on the bus, I don't know if you've never ridden a bus, but it's always allowed uh, the elder, the women with children sit, and then everyone else, they would, and people with disabilities. So everybody else would slowly migrate to the back, and I take for granted for having only that challenge because these people, back in the days, they didn't, this was just the law of the land, that black people were not considered equal. So let's get back to it. Blake could see that Mrs. Park had not risen. Look, ma'am, I told you I want the seat. Are you going to stand up? At that, Rosalie McCullough Parks uttered her first words to him. No. Blake responded, if you don't stand up, I'm gonna have you arrested. Mrs. Parks told him to go right ahead, that she was not going to move. Blake said nothing. Blake said nothing more, but got off the bus and went to the phone. Pause there. So this white bus driver, he got off the phone to call the police to disrupt everyone's evening, getting off of work or wherever they're going to, because this black woman did not want to get up from her seat to let this white man sit down. So just think about this. So it would have been just one seat, and they couldn't sit across from him because he had the whole row. So if one white person wanted one seat in a particular row that black people occupied, all of them had to get up to allow this one white person occupy. And which I'm going to say time and time again, whiteness is a construct. So I'm just going to mention that throughout this read. Blake said nothing more, but got off the bus and went to the phone. No one spoke to Mrs. Park, and some passengers began leaving the bus, not wanting to be inconvenienced by the incident. No, they got off the bus because no one wants the police talking to them. um, so I'm always going to stop at a half an hour, you guys. So I got 15 more minutes, but I'm almost done, with my 2 pages. Mrs. Parks was neither frightened nor angry. I was thinking that the only way to let them know no, I felt I was being mistreated was to do only, let me hold this up, was to, not to be treated, was to just do what I did, resist the order. She later recalled in interviews. I had not thought about it, and I had not taken no previous resolution until it happened. And then I simply decided that I would not get up. I was tired. But I was usually tired at the end of the day, and I was not feeling well. But then there had been many days I had not felt well. I had felt for a long time that if I was ever told to get up so a white person can sit, that I would refuse to do so. The moment had come, and she had the courage to say no. Now, from testimonies that I've read, in um, other books and articles, when they interviewed Rosa Parks, there was actually a plan, for, I want to say, her or other people, but this was like for her to resist. I don't know if this was like the initial plan, but um, yeah, these are the things that, I think we forget when we feel like we have passed that era in our life where we don't have to fight for diversity, equity, inclusion. This is one of those. Okay, getting back to it. Um, Blake returned from the phone and he stood silently in the door of the bus. After a few minutes, a police squad car pulled up and two officers, FB Day and DW Mixon, got on the bus. Blake pointed to Mrs. Park, said he needed the seat, and that the other one stood up. The two policemen came towards her, and one, in Mrs. Park's words, asked, me if the driver asked me to stand. I said yes. He asked, why didn't you stand up? I said, I didn't think I should have to. um, I asked him, why do you push us around? He said, I don't know, but the law is the law, and you are under arrest. So the moment he said that I was under arrest, I stood up. One picked up my purse, one picked up my shopping bag, and we got off the bus. They escorted me to the patrol car and returned to talk to Blake. The driver confirmed that he wanted to press charges under Montgomery's um, bus segregation ordinance. Uh, that is crazy. He decided that he wanted to press charges, and that's a heart issue, you guys. That's a heart issue. That you were so adamant on punishing this woman because she told you no, because she told you she had the right to sit down. But these are the situations that past and presently black and brown people, but I'm particularly talking about black people, dealt with. And the officers took Mrs. Parks to the police headquarters and then to the city jail. By then, Mrs. Park was tense and her throat was uncommonly dry. She spied a water fountain, but was quickly told that she could not drink from it. It was for whites only. Her processing complete, Mrs. Parks was allowed to call home to tell her family what had transpired. I'm gonna pause this. All right. Word of Mrs. Parks' arrest began to spread even before the phone call. One messenger on the phone told a friend of Mrs. Parks about the event. And that friend, Miss Bertha Butler, immediately called home of a immediately called the home of a longtime black activist, E.D. Nixon, the past president of Montgomery's National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, also known as the NAACP um, chapter, um, NAACP chapter of the most outspoken figure and the most outspoken figure in the black community. Nixon was not at home, but his wife, Arlette, was. And she phoned his small downtown office. Nixon, you okay? Y'all have to forgive me. My cat. I have several cats, so every now and then, if you hear me like feel like if I'm talking like in the ether, I'm really talking to my cats because they like to jump around. But anyway, let's get back to this. I'm not editing this out. Nixon was out at the moment, but when he returned a few moments later, he saw the message to call home. What's up? He asked his wife. She told him of Mrs. Parks' arrest, but couldn't tell him what the charge was. Nixon hung up and immediately called the police station. The desk officer rudely told Nixon that the charge was against Miss Parks were none of his business, determined to pursue the matter, but knowing the Montgomery's principal black lawyer, Fred Gray, was out of town. Nixon called the home of a white lawyer, Clifford Durr, one of the city's few racial liberals. Durr agreed to call the station to learn the charges, and after doing so, he immediately called Nixon back and related the details. Nixon told Durr that he would go downtown to sign the $100 bond to secure Mrs. Parks' release. Sometimes when I'm reading this, I really do have to pause because it's just appalling to me how black people were openly treated that way back then. And now we're like in a rebirth of the same type of madness. So So let's get back to the reading. Um, Nixon told Durr that he will go downtown to sign the $100 bond to secure Mrs. Parks' release, and Durr told him to stop by and that he would go along. When Nixon pulled up in front of the house, both Durr and his wife Virginia hurried out to meet him, and the three set off for the city jail. Mm. I have something to say about the language, but his descriptions, um, and we'll talk about that someday on the live because I kind of annotated and highlight some of these areas where I felt like the language a little problematic, but I guess it's just reading is kind of like, did they have to say it that way? Like they would not have hurried or been excited if nothing. Anyway, let's get back to this because I only have about a few more minutes. Mrs. Parks and Mr. Nixon and the Durs all had known each other for a number of years. Mrs. Parks, 42 years old at the time of her arrest, had been an active member and occasional officer of Montgomery's NAACP chapter since 1943 and had worked with Nixon on a number of voter registration efforts. Nixon, a Pullman porter, whose job regularly took him to Chicago and other northern cities, had been a stalwart member of, of A. Philip Randolph's Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters, as well as a local activist since the 1920s. Um, I'll mention that in later. I was going to talk a little bit more about A. Philip Randolph and the great work that he did with the sleeping car porters. And it was a union for African Americans who worked on the trains, and it revolutionized, evolved into something bigger. But yeah, they are in the process of like restoring the museum. So maybe someday we'll take a tour, but let's get back to this reading. um, okay, give me one. Let me get back to this reading. The Durs, Alabama natives who had returned to the state several years earlier following Clifford's service on the Federal Communications Commission, had become friendly with Nixon through his political activism, needing a good string seamstress to help with their children's clothes. Mrs. Durr had asked Nixon if he could recommend anyone, and Nixon told her he knew of this person, his NAACP colleague, Mrs. Rosa Parks. Beginning in 1953 or 1954, Mrs. Parks was a regular visitor of the Durrs' home. Over the years, the Durrs had heard distressing stories of how Montgomery bus drivers regularly insulted black passengers. Mrs. Parks once told them about how she had been physically thrown off the bus some 10 years earlier when this is the part I was talking about, when after paying her fare in the front of the bus, she had refused to get off and re-enter by the back of the bus, a custom often inflicted on black drivers. And I think about these privileges, young people have when they say, "Oh, we don't need to vote." That was back then, and it's the buffoonery and the madness. And this is what happens when we don't continue to tell these stories of the past, right? Because we think we're out of the woods because we had a black president. I've never seen any outward aggression towards a president since Barack Obama. But let's continue. Um, on their way to the jail, Nixon and the Durs discussed the possibility of Rosa Parks being a test case. They knew how strong her character was and that she had been strengthened. She had confidence, self confidence in her past few months. Following a 2-week interracial conference that the Durs had arranged for her to attend at Tennessee Highlander Folk School in late July. At the jail, the desk officer instantly handed the bond papers to Clifford Durr for signature. Durr told him no. Mr. Dixon, a property owner, would would be the man to sign. Mrs. Parks was released, and they all headed to the Parks home to discuss the matter over coffee. It's nothing like good conversation and coffee, you guys. I'm coming to the final part of this last page, so let me finish. Clifford Durr listened to Mrs. Parks' description of her arrest on the bus and explained how, under the precise terms of Montgomery's segregation ordinance, these ain't even laws; these are ordinance, you guys. She could not be convicted for refusing to get up since no other seat had been available to her to move to, as the law required. So, um, yeah, we would get into more discussions on this as I do my lives, and I'll give everybody opportunities. I will probably like go over what I read, but let me finish this paragraph because I'm going over the pages that I will read. But I do have 4 more minutes left. Nixon, however, emphasized that this was just what they had been waiting for. This is the case. We can boycott the bus line with this and at the same time go to the Supreme Court. Mrs. Park was not immediately convinced that her arrest could be sparked for all of that. But Nixon's enthusiasm soon persuaded her, although her husband was extremely fearful of possible white reprisal. Mrs. Park told Nixon, "If you think it is all right, I'll go along with you." And so I'm going to wrap it up right there for this reading session. However, let's go over some key points that um, they were looking for a test case to end bus discrimination. And so Rosa Parks, being the ideal person who have had the training and the understanding of resistance, she was the one to, she was the one, unfortunately, they had to go through, being arrested and taken off the bus. But also, um, she was also the likely candidate to, you know, um, I guess you say spark the protest. And so from there, you have this attorney Durr who's been listening to all of these issues and working with the activist community to address some of their concerns about equality. So that is just the start um, of of the idea of boycotting. Like it is so much more. Like I haven't read this book in a while, but stay along with me if you have any more questions. We'll get into it. I would like to finish possibly first actual the first well, we probably won't be able to do that one. The first part one is like 70 pages out, but I'm going to keep reading to we get to those 70 pages, and then we can have an all around discussion about everything that I've discussed in here instead of reading the chapters. So I would do it like that, like after every chapter, just have a discussion about what we read instead of doing the reading. And so between them, we can do a little bit of both and make comments about it, or submit questions, or put some issues that like that we want to highlight. So in saying that, I want to tell you thank you for stopping by. Come back for part two. I think I'm going to just name the segments part one, part two. So we'll see. But also, if you have any questions, or if you want to inquire it, or get the book is Bearing the Cross, David Garrow. I don't have the jacket on because I took it off. But I will see you in my next book read. Bye.